The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls of the cabin. Outside December, snow fell thick and silent over the Cascade Mountains, blanketing the world in white. Inside, warmth battled against the winter cold, and two men sat in the golden glow of flame light. Caleb Blackwood was 105 years old. His face was a map of deep lines carved by sun and wind, his hair white as fresh snow. But his eyes remained bright and focused. Those eyes had seen things most men could never imagine. Wars, deaths, love found and lost and found again. Now they watched the young man sitting across from him. William Blackwood was 20 years old, his great-grandfather's descendant through the eldest line. The Army uniform fit him well pressed and proper, but his face held that peculiar mix of fear and excitement that comes to all young men standing at the threshold of war. Tomorrow he would board a train east. In 2 weeks he would ship out to Europe to a war that had already consumed millions of lives across an ocean he had never seen. Grandpa Caleb William said, his voice breaking the comfortable silence, "They say you were the bravest man these mountains ever knew, but you never talk about it. You never tell the stories." The old man was quiet for a long moment. He stared into the fire as if reading something in the flames that no one else could see. His gnarled hands, still strong despite their age, rested on the arms of his chair. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady, weathered but steady. "Brave? No, boy. I was never brave. I was just a man trying to make up for his mistakes, trying to live with what he'd lost." William leaned forward. He had heard hints of this story his whole life. Whispers from his father, fragments from his grandmother before she passed, but never the full truth. Never from the man himself. Caleb reached down beside his chair and lifted a wooden box onto his lap. The box was old, older than William, made of pine that had darkened with time and touch. He opened it slowly, his movements deliberate. Inside were 3 objects. First, a piece of turquoise stone, polished smooth, strung on a leather cord. The stone caught the firelight and held it glowing with an inner warmth that seemed almost alive. Second, a small brown bottle, its glass clouded with age, a faded label barely readable in the dim light. Third, a photograph, sepia-toned and slightly blurred, showing a young woman with long dark hair standing beside a tall man with a wild beard. Both were dressed in their finest clothes. Both were smiling. "This story," Caleb said, lifting the photograph with careful fingers, "begins in the fall of 1883. I was 45 years old. I thought I had buried everything worth feeling alongside my first family. I thought I was dead inside, just a body moving through the world, waiting for my time to end." He set the photograph down gently and looked at his great-grandson. "But I was wrong. And this is how I learned that even dead men can come back to life." The cabin seemed to grow quieter. Even the fire settled into a gentle whisper. William did not move. He barely breathed. And in that hushed moment the old man began to speak, and the years fell away like autumn leaves, and the story unfolded. Autumn, 1883. The Cascade Mountains, Washington Territory. Caleb Blackwood stood at the edge of Widow's Vale waterfall, checking his trap lines in the thin October sunlight. He was 45 years old, then his beard long and dark with threads of gray, his hair hanging past his shoulders. His body was lean and hard from 5 years of mountain living. His hands bore scars from traps and knives, and the 1,000 small violences of survival. He wore buckskin and wool layers against the coming cold. His rifle, a Winchester Model 1873, hung across his back. His knife rode on his hip. These were his companions now, these and the silence. The waterfall roared beside him, 50 feet of white water crashing down over black stone. Mist rose in clouds, catching the light, turning the air to gold. It was beautiful. It was always beautiful. Caleb had stopped noticing 5 years ago. He moved along the trap line, checking each steel jaw for sign of animals. 2 held nothing. The third had caught a marten, its small body already cold. Caleb removed it with practiced hands, reset the trap, and moved on. He would skin the marten tonight, sell the pelt in spring. This was his life now. Simple, solitary, safe from the pain of caring. Then he heard the sound. At first he thought it was wind through the trees. But no, it was a voice. Faint, distant, speaking words he almost recognized. The rhythm was wrong for English, the cadence unfamiliar, yet hauntingly familiar from years long past. Apache. Caleb froze. His hand went to his knife. He knew those sounds, that particular music of language. He had learned enough during his army years to recognize it, to feel the old memories stir like buried bones. But what was an Apache doing here this far north in these mountains? He moved toward the sound, stepping carefully, making no noise. Years of hunting had taught him to move like smoke through the forest. He circled wide, coming at the sound from an angle, staying in cover. And then he saw her. A young woman knelt beside the stream below the waterfall. Her body was bent over a large stone that sat half in the rushing water. She gripped the stone with both hands, her fingers white with the strength of her hold. Her face was flushed, deep red. Sweat soaked her clothes despite the cold air. Her body shook with violent tremors. She was speaking. No, not speaking. Praying. The Apache words came in gasps, broken and desperate. Words Caleb could not fully understand, but could feel the weight of. Words spoken by someone standing at the edge of an abyss. His first thought was attack. Someone had hurt her. He scanned the trees, looking for movement, for threat. His rifle came off his shoulder, but he saw nothing, heard nothing but the waterfall and her voice. He looked closer at the woman. Her clothes were strange for this country. A long dress in the Quaker-style plain gray wool, now torn at the shoulder. Her hair was black and long, hanging loose around her face. Her feet were bare, her shoes lost somewhere along whatever path had brought her here. Dark bruises marked her neck like fingerprints. Caleb stepped forward, breaking from cover. "Miss," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "Can you hear me?" The woman turned her head toward him. Her eyes were wrong. The pupils were huge, swallowing the brown of her iris-black pools that reflected no light. She tried to focus on him, but could not. Her gaze slid away, then snapped back, then away again, like a compass seeking true north and finding only chaos. "Help," she whispered in English. The word came out slurred, thick, as if her tongue had forgotten how to shape sounds. "Please, something wrong." Then her legs gave out. She collapsed sideways, her grip on the stone finally breaking. Caleb lunged forward and caught her before she hit the ground. Her body was burning hot, fever hot, but wrong somehow. This was not the heat of sickness. This was something else, something chemical, something poisonous working its way through her blood. Her pulse hammered against his hand where he held her wrist. Too fast. Dangerously fast. 140 beats per minute at least, maybe more. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, each breath a struggle. Her skin was slick with sweat despite the October chill. "What happened?" Caleb asked, switching to the few Apache words he knew, the ones Red Sky had taught him years ago during the wars that seemed like another lifetime now. The woman's eyes found his face and held for a moment. She tried to speak in Apache, failed, then switched to English. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The tonic. Dr. Ashford's Mountain Vitality. He said it would help me journey, but something is wrong." She fumbled with a small bag that hung from her belt. Caleb took it gently from her shaking fingers and opened it. Inside was a brown glass bottle, half empty. The label read, "Dr. Vincent Ashford's Mountain Vitality Tonic for Strength and Endurance." Caleb pulled the cork and smelled the contents. The scent hit him immediately. Sweet and chemical, with an underlying bitterness he recognized from his army days, from field hospitals and wounded men screaming in the night. Laudanum. Opium. This was not medicine. This was poison. "Jesus," he breathed. The woman clutched at his arm. Her fingers dug into the buckskin with desperate strength. "Don't leave me," she said. Her voice broke. "Not after everything." Her eyes rolled back. She was losing consciousness. Caleb made his decision in an instant. He could not leave her here. She would die. If not from the drug, then from exposure. Night was coming, and the temperature would drop below freezing. The mountain showed no mercy to those caught unprepared. His cabin was 8/10 of a mile away up the mountainside, hidden in a grove of Douglas fir. He had to get her to shelter, to warmth, to safety. He shouldered his rifle, scooped the woman into his arms, and started walking. She was not heavy, but the trail was steep and rough. Caleb moved carefully, watching his footing, adjusting his grip when she trembled or thrashed. The drug was working deeper into her system now. She began to hallucinate. "The mountain spirits," she whispered, staring at something only she could see. "They're here. Mother, I see you. Mother, why is there fire?" She cried out suddenly, a sharp sound of terror that echoed through the trees. Caleb spoke to her in Apache, using the words Red Sky had taught him years ago, words that meant safety and movement and the promise of healing. "Nihi nanilkad," he said quietly. "Adul, we are moving. You will be well now." The woman seemed to hear him. Her thrashing eased slightly. She turned her face into his chest and gripped his buckskin shirt with desperate fingers. "Don't let me die like this," she whispered in English. "Not after everything. Please." "I won't," Caleb said. "You have my word." He did not know why he said it. He had not made a promise to another human being in 5 years, not since he had stood over 3 graves on a hillside and sworn never to care about anyone again. But the words came anyway, unbidden, from some part of him he thought was dead. The cabin appeared through the trees as the sun touched the western peaks. It was small and rough, built by Caleb's own hands from logs he had cut and shaped. Smoke rose from the stone chimney. He had banked the fire before leaving that morning, as he always did. Inside would be warm. He kicked the door open and carried the woman inside. The cabin was simple. 1 room, a stone fireplace, a rope bed covered in furs, a table and 2 chairs, traps and furs hanging from the rafters, tools along the walls. No decoration, no softness, no sign that a woman had ever lived here. But once they had. Once this cabin had been full of life and laughter and love. Caleb pushed that thought away. He laid the woman on the bed and covered her with a bear fur. Then he built up the fire until it roared, filling the room with heat and light. He filled a pot with water from the barrel by the door and set it to boil. While he waited, he knelt beside the woman and checked her vital signs. Pulse still too fast, breathing rapid and shallow, skin hot and dry. These were the signs of opium overdose. He had seen them before in soldiers who had taken too much laudanum for pain or who had developed a taste for the drug and could not stop. The danger was respiratory failure. If her breathing slowed too much, she would simply stop. He had to keep her conscious, keep her breathing, get the poison out of her system. When the water boiled, he made a tea from willow bark and chamomile. The willow would help with fever and pain. The chamomile would calm her nervous system. He also prepared a cloth soaked in cold water from the stream he kept in a bucket. He lifted the woman's head gently and held the cup to her lips. "Drink," he said. "It will help." She drank, coughing, sputtering, but getting some of the tea down. Then he laid her back and placed the cold cloth on her forehead. She gasped at the shock of it, but after a moment she sighed. "Cold," she whispered. "Feels good." Caleb sat back on his heels and waited. There was nothing more he could do except watch and hope. Either the drug would pass through her system, or it would not. Either she would live, or she would die. He had learned long ago that some things were beyond his control, but he could not stop himself from watching her face in the firelight, could not stop himself from checking her pulse every few minutes, could not stop himself from speaking to her in a low voice, telling her to hold on, to keep breathing, to fight. And slowly, over the course of an hour, her breathing began to steady. Her pulse slowed from 140 to 120 to 100. Her eyes, which had been rolling and unfocused, began to clear. Finally, she opened her eyes fully and looked at him. Really looked at him, seeing him for the first time. "You," she said. Her voice was hoarse but stronger. "You speak Apache." "A little." "Learned from scouts in the army," Caleb said. "You speak English well." "Quaker family," the woman said. "They raised me after Fort Apache." Caleb felt something twist in his chest. Fort Apache, 1881. He had heard about that. An attack. Civilians killed. Women and children. Another ugly chapter in a long, ugly war. "I'm sorry," he said. The woman studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice gaining strength with each word. "My name is Naomi Redwing. It means Morning Dove. I am Chiricahua Apache. I was born in Arizona Territory. I am 24 years old. I should not be alive right now, but you saved me." She paused, her eyes holding his. "Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Caleb did not have a good answer. He looked away from her steady gaze and busied himself with stoking the fire. "Because I could," he finally said. "Because leaving you there would have been murder." "Many would not see it that way," Naomi said quietly. "Many see Apache women as less than human, as animals, as things to be used or discarded. I am not those men." "No," Naomi agreed. "I do not think you are." She tried to sit up, and Caleb moved quickly to help her, propping her against the wall with furs behind her back. She looked around the cabin, taking in every detail with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You live alone," she said. It was not a question. "Yes. This cabin feels like a tomb." Caleb flinched. She had cut straight to the truth with 3 words. "There's clothes in that trunk," he said, nodding toward a wooden chest by the wall. "My wife's. You can wear them. I'll turn my back." He stood and faced the wall while Naomi changed. He heard the rustle of fabric, the soft sounds of movement. When she spoke again, her voice was still weak but steadier. "You can turn around now." Caleb turned. Naomi sat on the bed wearing a simple wool dress that had belonged to Elizabeth. The dress was too large for her smaller frame, but it was clean and warm. Her long black hair hung loose around her shoulders. Even weakened by the drug, even dressed in a dead woman's clothes, she was striking. There was a strength in her face, a fierce intelligence in her eyes that reminded Caleb of a hawk. "Thank you," she said, "for the clothes, for your help, for your kindness to a stranger." "You should rest," Caleb said. "That tonic will take time to work through your system. You need sleep." "I need to warn others," Naomi said. Her voice took on an urgent edge. "Dr. Ashford sold 20 bottles to the Quaker Hospital in Portland. If they are all like this—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. "Who is Dr. Ashford?" Caleb asked. Naomi's face darkened. "A snake in gentleman's clothes. He came to Portland 1 month ago. Very polite, very educated. He spoke of helping people travel safely through difficult terrain. He sold his tonics to doctors and missionaries. Everyone trusted him." She paused, and Caleb saw her hands clench in her lap. "But I heard him," she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "2 days ago I was bringing supplies to the hospital storage room. He was there with another man. I heard him say, 'The Apache girl won't make it past the first day.' Strong reaction. Perfect for the Canadian buyers." Caleb felt ice slide down his spine. "Canadian buyers." Naomi met his eyes. "I think Dr. Ashford is not just selling medicine. I think he is testing it, finding women who react strongly to the drug, women who become controllable, easy to transport." She paused. "Easy to sell." The words hung in the air like poison. Caleb had heard rumors of such things, trafficking rings that operated along the border, men who bought and sold human beings like cattle. He had never believed the stories were as widespread as people claimed. But looking at Naomi now, at the bruises on her neck, at the terror that still lingered in her eyes, he believed. "That is why you were alone on the mountain," he said. "You were running." "Yes. I took nothing but this bag and 1 bottle of his tonic. I thought if I could reach the mission at St. Benedict, I could warn them, get help. But I drank the tonic this morning to help me walk faster and—" She gestured helplessly at herself. "Now I understand what he meant by strong reaction." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he asked the question that had been bothering him. "Why did you drink it if you suspected it was dangerous?" Naomi smiled sadly. "Because I am Apache. Because I have learned that sometimes you must take risks to survive. Because I thought 1 bottle could not hurt and I needed the strength." She paused. "I was wrong." "You are not wrong now," Caleb said. "You were right to run, right to suspect, right to fight. But now I have brought danger to your door." Naomi said, her voice soft but certain. "Dr. Ashford will look for me." He will know I am not dead. He will come. Let him come." The words surprised Caleb even as he said them. 5 years of solitude, 5 years of carefully constructed walls, 5 years of telling himself he wanted nothing to do with the world and its troubles. And here he was, ready to fight for a woman he had met 2 hours ago. Naomi studied his face. Why, she asked softly. "Why would you risk yourself for me? You do not know me. You owe me nothing." Caleb looked away from her penetrating gaze. He stared into the fire and saw, as he always did, 3 faces: Elizabeth, Daniel, Grace, the family he had lost, the family he had failed to save. 5 years ago, he said quietly, "My wife and children died of diphtheria. I was hunting 60 miles away. By the time I returned, they had been dead for 3 days. No one had helped them. No one had come. They died alone." He stopped, his throat tight. It was the most he had spoken about that day to anyone. Ever. "I am sorry," Naomi said. Her voice held genuine compassion. Maybe if someone had helped them, Caleb continued still looking at the fire, they would have lived. Maybe not. But no one tried. Everyone in that town knew they were sick. Everyone stayed away, afraid of catching the disease themselves. He finally looked at Naomi. "I cannot change what happened to them, but I can make sure it does not happen to you. You will not die alone. You will not die without someone fighting for you." Tears filled Naomi's eyes. She reached out and touched his hand where it rested on his knee. Just a brief touch, but it sent a shock through Caleb's system like lightning. "Your wife was fortunate," Naomi said softly, "to have a man who loved her so much he cannot stop." "She is dead because I loved her," Caleb said bitterly. "If I had been there." "You would have died too," Naomi finished. "And then who would be here now to save me?" The logic was simple and devastating. Caleb had no answer. They sat in silence, the fire crackling, the wind beginning to rise outside. Night had fallen fully now. The temperature was dropping. "You should rest," Caleb said again. "I will keep watch. Where will you sleep? I won't. Not tonight. If Ashford is looking for you, he might come in the dark. I need to be ready." Naomi nodded slowly. She lay back on the bed, pulling the furs up to her chin. Her eyes grew heavy almost immediately. The drug was still in her system, pulling her toward sleep. "Mr. Blackwood," she murmured, already half gone. "Just Caleb." "Caleb," she said. "Ayehi. That means thank you in my language." "Ado dul ju." Caleb replied, "You will be well." Naomi smiled, a small, soft smile that changed her entire face. Then she slept. Caleb sat in his chair by the fire, his rifle across his lap, and watched her breathe. In and out, steady and strong. Alive. And for the first time in 5 years, the cabin did not feel quite so empty. The following morning, Caleb woke with a start, his hand reaching for his rifle before his eyes were fully open. Pale gray light filtered through the cabin's single window. He had dozed off despite his intention to stay awake. His body had betrayed him, demanding rest he had not wanted to take. He looked immediately at the bed. Naomi was sitting up awake, watching him. She looked better. The flush had faded from her face. Her eyes were clear, but she was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of exhaustion that went deeper than one night could cure. "How long did I sleep?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. "Hours," Naomi said. "It is nearly dawn. You were tired. Your body took what it needed." Caleb stood, working the stiffness from his shoulders. He moved to the window and looked out. What he saw made his jaw tighten. Snow. 3 feet of it, fresh and white, covering everything. The storm had come in during the night, silent and swift. Already the trees were bent under the weight. The wind was still blowing, throwing more snow against the cabin walls. "We are trapped," Naomi said, reading his expression. For at least 36 hours, Caleb confirmed. Maybe longer. "Cannot travel in this." He saw the worry flash across her face. She stood, moved to the window beside him, and looked out at the white wilderness. "St. Benedict will be expecting me," she said. "And Dr. Ashford?" Caleb said. "He will realize you are not dead. How would he know you are here?" Naomi turned to face him. Pike Brennan saw you at Widow's Vale yesterday morning. He told everyone at the saloon. Ashford's men tracked your footprints in the snow before the storm covered them completely. Because someone will have seen you carrying a woman up the mountain. Because men like Ashford have eyes everywhere. As if summoned by her words, they heard it. The sound of horses. Multiple horses. Moving through the snow. Coming up the trail toward the cabin. Caleb grabbed his rifle and moved to the door. Get away from the window. Behind the table. Now. Naomi obeyed without question, moving quickly to crouch behind the heavy wooden table. Caleb positioned himself beside the door, rifle raised. He waited. The knock when it came was hard and demanding. Not the knock of a friend. The knock of someone who expected the door to be opened immediately. Caleb cracked the door open 6 inches, keeping his body behind it, his rifle ready. 3 men stood in the snow outside. The one in front was tall and well-dressed, wearing a fine coat and hat despite the weather. His face was clean-shaven, his features refined. He looked more like a banker than a mountain traveler. But his eyes were cold, dead, the eyes of a man who had seen too much and felt too little. "Good morning," the man said. His voice was smooth, cultured, with a slight Boston accent. "I am Dr. Vincent Ashford. I am looking for a young Apache woman, Miss Naomi Redwing. I heard she fell ill on the trail. I have come to ensure her well-being." Behind Ashford stood 2 men who were clearly not doctors. One was massive, at least 6 feet 4 inches tall, with a scar running across his face from temple to jaw. The other was thin and pale, with eyes like chips of ice. Both wore gun belts. Both had their hands near their weapons. Caleb kept his face blank. "Who told you she was here?" Ashford smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "Woodsman talk, Mr. Blackwood. May I see Miss Naomi?" "Just to examine her to make sure she is recovering properly. She is resting. Doesn't need examining." The big man behind Ashford took a step forward. "Move aside, mountain man." Caleb's rifle came up in one smooth motion, the barrel centering on the big man's chest. His thumb pulled back the hammer with a sharp click that was very loud in the cold air. "Take one more step," Caleb said quietly. "Test me." The big man froze. His hand twitched toward his gun, but he did not draw. Ashford raised both hands in a placating gesture. "Gentlemen, gentlemen, there is no need for violence." He looked at Caleb with those dead eyes. "Mr. Blackwood, I only want to help. Miss Naomi is confused. The tonic sometimes causes temporary disorientation. I simply want to ensure she receives proper care." "She is receiving proper care," Caleb said. "Now leave." Ashford's expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Something dangerous. "Very well," he said. "But I should mention I can see through your window, Mr. Blackwood. I can see Miss Naomi standing there behind your table. I can see that she spent the night here, alone with you." Caleb felt his grip tighten on the rifle. Ashford continued, his voice taking on a sympathetic tone that was worse than outright threat. "Miss Naomi, I am relieved you are safe, but I must say spending the night unchaperoned with a strange white man, the Quaker community would be most concerned, especially given your Apache heritage." From behind the table, Naomi's voice rang out clear and strong despite her fear. "Your tonic poisoned me, Dr. Ashford. You knew it would." Ashford turned his attention to her, and his smile grew wider. "Poisoned. My dear girl, you had a rare reaction. These things happen, but making such accusations from an Apache woman against a respected physician, well, who will believe you?" He let that hang in the air for a moment, then turned back to Caleb. "Mr. Blackwood, I will be in Silverstone for the next 72 hours. If Miss Naomi does not come to clarify her situation, I will have no choice but to inform the authorities that she has been kidnapped by a mountain recluse. Given your history." His eyes swept over the cabin, taking in every detail. "Given that you clearly live alone, that you have no family, that you have cut yourself off from society, they will believe me." Caleb's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. "Get off my land." "Of course," Ashford said. He tipped his hat. 72 hours, Miss Naomi. After that I ship my merchandise north, and you will be first on the list." He turned and walked back to his horse. The two men with him followed the big one, backing away slowly, his hand still near his gun. They mounted and rode away, disappearing into the snow and trees. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching until they were completely gone. Then he closed the door, barred it, and turned to face Naomi. She stood beside the table now, her face pale but her eyes blazing with anger. "He is going to destroy me," she said. Her voice shook, but not with fear, with rage. "Even if I speak the truth, they will see an Apache woman accusing a white doctor. I will be arrested. Or worse, they will send me to San Carlos." Caleb knew about San Carlos, the reservation in Arizona where the government was forcing all Apache people. He had heard the stories: starvation, disease, death. It was a slow execution hidden behind bureaucratic language and false promises. "You will not go to San Carlos," Caleb said. "How can you stop it? I give you my word. You will not die. You will not be taken. You will not face this alone." Naomi stared at him. "Why? You do not know me. I am a stranger who brought danger to your door. Why would you risk everything for me?" Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, and saw himself 5 years ago, alone, desperate, convinced the world held nothing but pain. And he remembered the promise he had made over 3 graves on a hillside. Never again would he stand by while someone suffered. Never again would he choose safety over doing what was right. Because 5 years ago he said quietly, "No one helped my family. Maybe if someone had, they would still be alive. I cannot change that. But I can make sure it does not happen to you." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. She crossed the space between them and did something that shocked them both. She hugged him. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Caleb to feel the warmth of another human being, the beat of another heart, the reminder that he was still alive. Then she stepped back, wiping her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Ayehi Caleb Blackwood, you are a good man." Before Caleb could respond, they heard another sound outside, a different sound, the jingle of harness, a friendly whistle, a voice calling out in the storm. "Caleb, you in there, you old hermit, open up before I freeze." Caleb allowed himself a small smile. He knew that voice. He moved to the door, unbarred it, and opened it wide. Standing in the snow, leading a massive horse, was Samuel Grayson. Everyone called him Gray. He was 62 years old, 6 feet 4 inches tall, and built like an oak tree. His beard was white as the snow around him, and his face was weathered and kind. He grinned when he saw Caleb. "Heard you had company," Gray said. "Heard you got trouble. Thought I'd ride up and see for myself." "News travels fast." "Pike Brennan's got a loud mouth at the saloon," Gray said, talking about teaching the savage lover a lesson. His eyes moved past Caleb and found Naomi. His expression softened. Miss Gray said, "I am Samuel Grayson. Everyone calls me Gray. I knew your people in Arizona. Good folks?" Naomi looked surprised. It was rare for a white man to speak of Apache with respect. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson. Just Gray, miss." He stomped the snow off his boots and came inside, bringing cold air and the smell of horses with him. He looked around the cabin, noting the rifle by the door, the tension in Caleb's shoulders, the fear barely hidden in Naomi's eyes. So Gray said, settling himself in a chair that creaked under his weight, "Tell me everything, and do not leave anything out." For the next hour they talked. Naomi told her story. Caleb described Ashford's visit. Gray listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. When they finished, Gray was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "I did some asking around before I rode up. Ashford is not just a snake oil salesman. He is worse than that." He pulled a folded newspaper from inside his coat and spread it on the table. The paper was old, dated 1879. The headline read, "Prominent Physician's Daughter Vanishes in San Francisco." Gray tapped the article. Dr. Vincent Ashford, Johns Hopkins Medical School, graduated 1855. Brilliant surgeon, respected in his community. His wife died of cancer in 1877. He tried everything to save her. In the end, he gave her morphine. Too much. She died easier, but there was talk that he had helped her along, to end her suffering. He looked up at Naomi and Caleb. Then in 1879 his daughter Rebecca vanished, 20 years old. Beautiful girl. She was helping at a mission in San Francisco working with immigrants. One day she was there, the next day gone. Gray's voice went very quiet. Ashford searched for her for years, spent everything he had, went into debt. Finally, in 1882 he found out what happened, what Naomi whispered. She had been taken by a trafficking ring, Chinese tongs, sold to a brothel. By the time Ashford tracked her down, he paused. She was already dead. Opium overdose, just like her mother. The cabin was silent except for the fire and the wind. Naomi's hand went to her mouth. Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. "He is looking for her," Naomi said. "He is still looking. In every woman he takes, he is trying to find his daughter." Maybe Gray said. Or maybe he is punishing the world for taking her. Or maybe grief twisted him into something that is not quite human anymore. I do not know. But I know this. He pulled out another piece of paper. A list of names. In the last 2 years, at least 12 women have disappeared along the Oregon-Washington border. All of them bought medicine from Ashford first. Naomi leaned forward and read them. Her face went white. "I know this name," she said, pointing. "Catherine Mitchell. She taught at St. Anne's School before moving to Portland. She was kind to me, taught me to read better. She mentioned meeting a kind doctor who gave her medicine for headaches." Naomi's voice broke. "She disappeared 8 months ago." Caleb stood and moved to the window. Outside the storm was lessening. By tomorrow they could travel. But to where Silverstone was controlled by Ashford's cousin, the sheriff. St. Benedict was 3 days away, and Ashford's men would be watching the trails. Fort Mason Gray said, reading Caleb's thoughts, "Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hayes. He is a good man, fair, he will listen, and he has the authority to arrest Ashford." Caleb turned. "Hayes was my commanding officer. I served under him for 12 years. When I left, I did not say goodbye. I just disappeared into these mountains." "Then maybe it is time to come back," Gray said. "Not for yourself, for her." He nodded at Naomi. She was still staring at the list of names, tears running down her face. "How many?" she whispered. "How many women like me?" "Too many," Gray said gently. "But you can help us stop him. You are alive. You can testify. You can save the others." Naomi looked up at Caleb. "Will you help me? Will you take me to Fort Mason?" Caleb thought of Elizabeth, of Daniel, of Grace, of 3 graves on a hillside and a promise made in grief and rage. He thought of 5 years of solitude and safety and slow death of the soul. And he thought of this woman standing in his cabin asking him to risk everything for her. This stranger who was not a stranger anymore. "Yes," he said, "I will help you. We leave when the storm breaks." Naomi crossed to him and took his hand in both of hers. "Thank you," she said. And then in Apache too. "We will walk together safely." Caleb felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been frozen for 5 years. He looked down at their joined hands and realized with a shock that he did not want to let go. "Rest tonight," he said, his voice rough. "Tomorrow we begin. Tomorrow we fight." Outside the storm began to fade. The wind dropped. The snow stopped falling. And in the silence that followed, 3 people sat by a fire in a cabin in the mountains and prepared for war. The storm broke at dawn, leaving the world crystalline and silent. Caleb stood outside the cabin watching the sun rise over the Cascade Peaks, turning the snow from blue to gold to blinding white. The temperature had dropped to 10 degrees below freezing. His breath came out in clouds. Every sound was amplified in the cold, clear air. Behind him the cabin door opened. Naomi stepped out wrapped in one of Elizabeth's old coats, a wool scarf around her neck. She had slept fitfully, waking several times from dreams she would not speak of. But she looked stronger now, determined. "How far to Fort Mason?" she asked. 28 miles as the eagle flies," Caleb said. "But we are not eagles. On foot through this snow, avoiding the main trails, it will take us 2 full days, maybe 3. and we have 72 hours before Ashford moves his merchandise." 68 now, Gray said, emerging from the cabin behind Naomi. He had stayed the night sleeping on the floor by the fire. Lost 4 hours to the storm. Caleb nodded grimly. He had been doing the calculations in his head all night. Every hour mattered. Every delay could mean the difference between life and death for the women Ashford held captive. "We need to move fast," he said, "but we also need to move smart. Ashford will have men watching the trails. If they spot us, if they report back, Ashford will disappear, take his prisoners north and vanish like smoke." "So we go through the wilderness," Naomi said, "where they cannot follow on horses." "Exactly," Caleb confirmed. "But that means rough terrain. No fires, cold camps, hard walking. Can you do it?" Naomi met his eyes steadily. "I am Apache. We learn to survive before we learn to walk. Do not underestimate me, Caleb Blackwood." Despite the tension, despite the danger, Caleb found himself almost smiling. "I will try not to." They spent an hour preparing. Caleb packed light and efficient. His Winchester rifle with 50 rounds of ammunition. His Bowie knife 14 inches of steel sharp enough to split a hair. 50 feet of strong rope. Flint and steel for starting fires if absolutely necessary. Dried elk meat, hardtack, a bag of cornmeal, 2 canteens. Naomi assembled a small medical kit from his supplies, adding herbs and roots she recognized from her Apache training. Yarrow for bleeding, sage for infection, willow bark for pain. She moved with quiet confidence, her hands sure despite the ordeal she had endured. Gray packed similarly, though his old shoulder injury meant he carried less weight. The bullet had passed through cleanly years ago, but the old injury would slow him down. He insisted on coming anyway. 2 guns are better than 1, he said when Caleb tried to convince him to stay. And you will need someone watching your back while you are watching hers. Caleb could not argue with that logic. They set out an hour after sunrise, heading northeast through the forest. Caleb led breaking trail through the deep snow. Naomi followed in his footsteps, moving with a grace that surprised him. Despite wearing borrowed clothes and boots too large for her feet, she kept pace without complaint. Gray brought up the rear, his rifle ready, his eyes constantly scanning their back trail for pursuit. The first few miles were brutally hard. The snow was knee-deep in places waist-deep where it had drifted. Caleb's legs burned, sweat soaked his clothes despite the cold, but he did not slow down, could not slow down. Time was their enemy now as much as Ashford's men. By midday they had covered 6 miles and climbed 1,500 feet. They stopped briefly in a stand of hemlock trees, catching their breath, eating a handful of dried meat and hardtack. No one spoke. They were saving their energy. As they rested, Caleb taught Naomi the skills she would need. He showed her how to read tracks in the snow, distinguishing the prints of deer from elk cougar, from wolf man from animal. He taught her to test ice before stepping on it to listen for the hollow sound that meant danger beneath. He showed her how to find water even in winter, where the snowmelt would be cleanest, safest to drink. Naomi absorbed everything like dry ground soaking up rain. She asked intelligent questions, offered observations that showed she understood not just the facts, but the underlying principles. When she showed Caleb how to identify edible plants even in winter, how to make a poultice from pine resin and moss, he realized she was teaching him as much as he was teaching her. "Your grandmother taught you well," he said. "She taught me to see," Naomi replied, "to watch, to listen. She said the world tells us everything we need to know if only we pay attention. A wise woman. She died when I was 15. Soldiers gave our people blankets infected with smallpox. She knew the blankets were dangerous. She warned everyone. But we had no choice. It was winter. We were cold. We took the blankets." Naomi's voice went flat. "Within a month, half our people were dead. My grandmother was one of them." Caleb felt rage kindle in his chest. He had heard of such things: deliberate infection, biological warfare disguised as charity. It made him ashamed to wear the same skin as the men who had done it. "I am sorry," he said. "You were a soldier," Naomi said. She was not asking. She was stating a fact. "Yes. For 12 years. I fought in the Indian Wars. He stopped, not sure how to continue, how to confess to this woman that he had been part of the machine that destroyed her people. You killed Apache, Naomi finished for him. No. I never fought Apache. Nez Perce, Sioux. But I was part of the army that did. I followed orders. I did what I was told. He looked at her directly. That does not make me innocent. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. My grandmother used to say that every man has two wolves fighting inside him. One is anger, hatred, violence. The other is compassion, kindness, love. The wolf that wins is the one you feed. She met his eyes. I think you stopped feeding the angry wolf a long time ago, Caleb Blackwood. I think that is why you saved me. Before Caleb could respond, Gray made a sharp sound, a warning. Caleb turned instantly, his hand going to his rifle. Tracks, Gray said quietly. 4 horses, coming from the south, moving fast. They all moved to where Gray stood. In the snow, clear as writing on paper, were the hoofprints, fresh, no more than 2 hours old. The horses had been moving at a fast walk, following a game trail that ran parallel to the route Caleb had chosen. They are looking for us, Naomi said. Or heading to intercept us, Caleb replied. They know we will try to reach Fort Mason. They are moving to cut off the direct route. So we go around, Gray said. Through Elk Ridge, Caleb agreed. The climbing became savage. The snow in the high passes was 4 feet deep, and they had to forge through it like swimmers through heavy surf. Naomi struggled now, her smaller body working twice as hard to make progress. But she did not complain, did not ask to rest. She simply put her head down and pushed forward. Caleb found himself watching her with something that felt dangerously close to admiration. This woman had been poisoned, chased, threatened, and now she was climbing a mountain in winter, and she did not break, did not falter. She endured. You are strong, he said during a brief rest. I am Apache, Naomi replied, as if that explained everything, and perhaps it did. They reached the ridgetop at sunset. Below them the land fell away in a series of steep valleys and frozen streams. In the distance, perhaps 20 miles away, Caleb could see the dark square shape of Fort Mason's smoke rising from its chimneys. So close. But with night falling and their bodies exhausted, they could go no further today. They would have to camp, rest, continue at first light. Caleb found a natural shelter, a deep overhang in the rock face that would protect them from wind and hide their presence. They settled in as darkness fell. No fire. Too dangerous. They ate cold rations and wrapped themselves in their coats and each other's body heat. Naomi sat between Caleb and Gray, shivering despite the layers of clothing. Caleb could feel the tremors running through her body. Without thinking, he moved closer, sharing his warmth. She leaned into him gratefully. Tell me about your family, she said quietly. Your wife? Your children? I want to know them. Caleb stiffened. He had not spoken of them in detail to anyone in 5 years, but something in Naomi's voice, something in the darkness, in the cold, in the strange intimacy of their situation, loosened his tongue. Elizabeth, he said. That was my wife's name. She was small like you, strong like you. She had red hair that caught the sun like fire. She laughed more than anyone I ever knew. She could find joy in the smallest things. A bird's nest, a flower growing through rock, the first snow. He paused, seeing her face in his mind. After 5 years, the image was beginning to fade. That terrified him more than anything. We met in Denver. I was 25, back from the war. She was working in her father's general store. I came in to buy supplies, and she argued with me about the price of coffee, said I was paying too much, said her father was cheating soldiers. She gave me a better price, and her father fired her for it. She sounds brave, Naomi said. She was braver than me. We married a month later, moved out here, built the cabin together, had 2 children. He paused. Daniel was born in 1869. Grace in 1872. They were everything. His voice caught. How did they die? Naomi asked gently. Diphtheria. It came to the valley in the winter of 1878. Started with the children. Daniel got sick first. then Grace, then Elizabeth. I was hunting up in the high country. A long hunt. I was gone for 9 days. He stopped, could not continue. But Naomi understood. You buried them, she said softly. Yes. On the hill behind the cabin, 3 graves. I planted pine trees over them, so they would never be alone. And then you buried yourself with them. It was not a question. Caleb nodded, not trusting his voice. Naomi shifted, turning to look at him in the darkness. My mother used to say, Shi ya aji, my little one. Those were her last words before the soldiers came, before the bullets. I was 12 years old. I held her while she died. Her hand found his in the dark, squeezed. I understand your pain, Caleb. I know what it is to lose everything, to wish you had died with them. But you did not die. You are here, and so am I, and perhaps that means something. Before Caleb could respond, before he could process what was happening in his chest where something frozen was beginning to crack, Gray spoke from where he sat on watch. They must have one of Ashford's guides, someone who knows these mountains. They're following the old trapper's trail, the one we avoided. Instantly, all 3 of them were alert. Caleb moved to the edge of the overhang and looked down. In the valley below, perhaps a mile away, he could see lights moving. 4 of them. Men on foot carrying torches searching. They are tracking us, Gray said. How, Naomi asked. We left no tracks on the rock. Does not matter how, Gray said. They are here, and they are coming up. Caleb's mind raced. The men below were moving slowly, carefully, but they were definitely climbing toward the ridge. In perhaps 2 hours they would reach this position. There was nowhere higher to run. They were trapped. Unless... We cannot run, Caleb said. So we fight. 4 of them, Gray said. 3 of us, 1 wounded, 1 woman. 1 woman who can fight, Naomi said sharply. Can you? Caleb asked, looking at her directly. Teach me, she replied. For the next 30 minutes, by the light of the stars, Caleb gave Naomi a crash course in violence. He showed her how to hold a knife. Not like cooking, like killing. Blade down, hammer grip, short stabbing motions to vital targets. He made her practice on a log over and over until the motion was automatic. He showed her how to move in a fight. Stay low, stay mobile, never stand still. If a man grabs you, do not pull away. Move into him, use his strength against him. Go for the eyes, the throat, the groin. Fight dirty, fight mean, fight to survive. Naomi absorbed it all with the same fierce concentration she had shown when learning to track. When they finished, she looked at Caleb with something new in her eyes. Not fear, not even anger, determination. I will not be taken, she said. I will die first. You will not die, Caleb replied. Not if I can prevent it. They prepared their ambush carefully. The men would have to come up a narrow defile, a natural choke point where the rock walls closed in. Caleb positioned himself on one side, hidden behind a boulder. Gray took the other side despite his wounded shoulder. Naomi stayed back out of sight, but close enough to help if needed. Then they waited. The torches grew closer. Caleb could hear voices now, men talking in low tones. He recognized one of them. Garrett Stone, the big man with the scar who had stood behind Ashford at the cabin. They are up here somewhere, Garrett was saying. The tracks stop at the ridge. Maybe they went around, another voice suggested. Or maybe they are hiding, Garrett replied. Waiting to ambush us, smart Caleb thought. This was not going to be easy. The men entered the defile, 4 of them as expected. Garrett in front, big and confident. Behind him, Silas, the thin man with cold eyes. Then 2 others Caleb did not recognize. All 4 carried rifles. All 4 looked ready for trouble. Caleb let them get halfway through the narrow passage. Then he stood up, rifle leveled. That is far enough, he said. 4 rifles swung toward him, but before anyone could fire, Gray stood up on the opposite side, his rifle covering the rear 2 men. Drop them, Gray said, or we drop you. For a moment everything hung in perfect balance. 4 men with guns, 2 men with guns, everyone about to die. Then Garrett laughed. You are bluffing, mountain man. You shoot me, my boys shoot you. Everyone dies. That what you want? If necessary, Caleb said, and he meant it. Garrett studied his face and saw the truth there, saw that Caleb Blackwood would kill him even if it meant dying himself. The big man's confidence wavered. "We do not want trouble," Garrett said. "We just want the girl. Hand her over. You two walk away. Simple." "No," Caleb said. "She is just an Indian," Garrett said, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. "Not worth dying for. Not worth this." That was when Naomi stepped out from her hiding place behind Caleb. She held no weapon, but she stood straight and proud. And when she spoke, her voice carried across the canyon like a bell. "I am Apache," she said. "I am Chiricahua. I am the granddaughter of medicine women and the daughter of warriors. I am worth more than you will ever understand." Garrett's face twisted with rage. "Uppity savage, I am going to enjoy breaking you." He raised his rifle. Everything happened at once. Caleb fired. The Winchester barked deafeningly loud in the confined space. Garrett staggered, hit in the shoulder, but did not fall. He fired back the bullet, whining off the rock inches from Caleb's head. Gray fired at the rear men. One went down screaming, clutching his leg. The other dove for cover. Silas rushed forward straight at Caleb. His rifle came up, finger on the trigger, and Naomi moved. She had been holding a rock fist-sized and heavy hidden in her coat. Now she threw it with all her strength. It caught Silas in the temple with a sound like a melon splitting. The thin man's eyes rolled back and he collapsed. Garrett roared and charged, forgetting his rifle, going for Caleb with his bare hands. The two men collided like bulls, grappling, punching, trying to kill each other with fists and fury. They went down in a tangle of limbs. Garrett was bigger, heavier, stronger, but Caleb had been a soldier. He knew how to fight. He got his thumb into Garrett's wounded shoulder and pressed hard. Garrett screamed and his grip loosened. Caleb twisted, broke free, drove his knee into Garrett's face. Bone crunched. Blood sprayed. Garrett grabbed Caleb's throat with both hands, choking him. Caleb could not breathe. His vision started to gray. He fumbled for his knife, found it, drew it, and drove the blade into Garrett's side between the ribs. Garrett's hands loosened. His eyes went wide. He looked down at the knife in his side, then up at Caleb, then down again. He tried to speak. Blood came out instead of words. He fell sideways and was still. Caleb gasped for air, his throat on fire. He looked around. Gray had his rifle on the remaining two men who had their hands up, surrendering. Silas was unconscious, possibly dead, blood pooling around his head. Garrett was definitely dead. Naomi stood frozen, staring at the carnage. She had never seen men killed before. Not like this. Not close. Caleb saw her start to shake. He went to her, took her shoulders gently. "Look at me," he said. "Not them. Me." When she raised her eyes to his face, he continued, "You did what you had to do. You saved my life. Do you understand? Without you, I would be dead right now." "I killed him," Naomi whispered. "I threw the rock, and I heard him fall, and I am glad. I am glad, Caleb." "What does that make me?" "Human," Caleb said. "It makes you human." Gray was tying up the two survivors. He searched them and found what he was looking for. A map. He unfolded it and swore. "Caleb, look at this." The map showed the territory between here and Silverstone, but it also showed something else. A building marked in red ink located 5 miles outside town. Next to it, in neat handwriting, Old Sawmill. Merchandise storage. Guards 6. Transport scheduled 48 hours. They are keeping the women there, Gray said. At the old sawmill. Caleb looked at the map, his mind working. They were 12 miles from Fort Mason, but the sawmill was only 8 miles away in a different direction. If they went to Fort Mason first, got help, came back, it would take at least 12 hours. Maybe more. In 12 hours, Ashford could move his prisoners, could vanish, could win. "We have to go now," Naomi said, reading his thoughts. "We have to save them now." "It is suicide," Gray said. 6 men. Fortified position. We are 3 people. 1 wounded. 4 people, Naomi said. "I fight." "You could die," Caleb said flatly. Naomi's eyes flashed. I could die doing nothing. I could die running to Fort Mason. I could die in my sleep 50 years from now. We all die, Caleb. The question is whether we die having done something that matters. Caleb looked at her. This woman who 2 days ago had been shaking from poison. This woman who had never killed, never fought, never faced real violence. This woman who was now standing in a canyon full of dead and wounded men, covered in blood that was not her own, and saying she would walk into hell if it meant saving others. He realized in that moment that he loved her, not in the way he had loved Elizabeth. That had been young love, fresh and bright and new. This was something different, something deeper, something forged in blood and fear and shared pain. He realized also that he would not survive losing her. Could not survive it. Not again. All right, he said, we go to the sawmill. We save them, all of them, and we do not die. Any of us. Agreed, Gray said. Agreed, Naomi echoed. They left the 2 surviving men tied to a tree with enough slack to eventually work free. Caleb took their weapons and ammunition. Gray took their boots. Without boots in this snow they would not get far, would not warn Ashford. By the time they reached civilization this would be over, one way or another. They walked through the night guided by the map and the stars. The sawmill was in a valley hidden from the main road, accessible only by an old logging trail. As they approached in the pre-dawn darkness, Caleb could see why Ashford had chosen it. Isolated, defendable, easy to watch. The building was 2 stories tall, made of weathered wood and corrugated metal. Most of the windows were boarded up. A single door at the front, a loading door at the back. Smoke rose from a metal chimney. Light showed in some windows. They watched from the tree line for an hour, counting the guards, learning the routine. 6 men, as the map had said, 2 at the front door, 2 at the back, 1 on the 2nd floor, 1 inside watching the prisoners. We need a distraction, Gray said, something to draw them out. We need more than that, Caleb replied. We need to get the women out before the shooting starts, otherwise they are hostages. Or worse, they die in the crossfire. They were still trying to solve this problem when Naomi spoke. I will go to the front door. I will tell them I am here to surrender, that I want Dr. Ashford's protection. They will take me inside. Once I am in, once I see where the women are, I will signal you. Then you attack. No, Caleb said immediately. Too dangerous. If they hurt you before we get in. Then you will come faster, Naomi said. She looked at him steadily. This is the only way, Caleb. You know it is. He wanted to argue, wanted to forbid it, wanted to find any other solution. But she was right, and they both knew it. If anything happens to you, he said, his voice rough with emotion he could not hide, I will not forgive myself. Not again. Naomi stepped close to him, so close he could feel her breath. She reached up and touched his face, her hand gentle on his bearded cheek. Then, do not let anything happen to me, she said softly. Come quickly, Caleb. I still have many stories to tell you. She kissed him, just once, just lightly. A brush of lips that lasted only a second but felt like forever. Then she stepped back, straightened her borrowed coat and walked out of the trees toward the sawmill. Caleb watched her go, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break his ribs. Gray put a hand on his shoulder. She will be fine, the old man said. She is strong. I know, Caleb replied. That is what terrifies me. They watched as Naomi approached the front door. The 2 guards saw her coming and raised their rifles. She stopped, raised her hand, spoke. Caleb could not hear the words, but he could see the result. One guard opened the door, the other gestured with his rifle. Naomi walked inside and disappeared from view. Caleb forced himself to breathe, forced himself to wait, forced himself to trust. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Caleb was about to give the signal to attack anyway when he saw it. Smoke, black and thick, pouring from a 2nd-floor window. Then flame, bright and hungry, eating at the old dry wood. That was the signal. Naomi had set a fire. Go, Caleb shouted. He and Gray burst from the trees, running full speed toward the sawmill. The guards at the front door were staring at the fire, shouting confused. They never saw Caleb until it was too late. He hit the first one like a locomotive, driving his shoulder into the man's chest, sending him flying. Gray shot the second one in the leg. The back door guards came running around the building. Caleb shot one. Gray shot the other. Both men went down. The guard on the second floor appeared at the window silhouetted by flames. He fired at Caleb and missed. Caleb fired back and did not miss. The guard disappeared. That left one, the one inside with the prisoners. Caleb kicked the front door open and went in low and fast. Rifle up. The interior was chaos. Smoke filled the air. Flames roared somewhere above, and there in the center of the main room was Dr. Vincent Ashford. He stood behind Naomi, one arm around her throat, a knife pressed to her neck. His face was twisted with rage and something that looked almost like grief. "Drop it," Blackwood Ashford said, "or I cut her throat right now." Caleb froze. His rifle was aimed at Ashford's head. One shot and the doctor would be dead. But Naomi would be dead too. The knife was already drawing a thin line of blood across her throat. "Let her go," Caleb said, keeping his voice calm. "This is over, Ashford. The soldiers will be here soon. You cannot escape." "Cannot escape." Ashford laughed. "A broken, terrible sound. I have not been able to escape for 4 years. Not since I found what was left of my daughter. Not since I realized the world took her and I could not stop it." His eyes were wild, red-rimmed, streaming tears. "Do you know what they did to her?" Ashford continued, his voice rising. "Do you know what they made her into? My beautiful, kind, innocent Rebecca, they filled her with poison. They used her until there was nothing left. And then they threw her away like garbage." "I know," Caleb said. "Gray told me. I am sorry for your loss." "Sorry," Ashford spat. "You are sorry. The world is full of sorry people. Sorry does not bring her back. Sorry does not make it right. I tried to make it right. I tried to balance the scales. But there are never enough. Never enough women to equal one Rebecca." Naomi spoke, then her voice strained from the pressure on her throat, but clear. "Your daughter would not want this. She would not want you to become the thing that destroyed her." "You did not know her," Ashford said. "No," Naomi agreed. "But I know you. I see you, Dr. Ashford. You are not a monster. You are a father who lost his child, a man drowning in grief. And you are trying to pull the whole world down with you because you cannot bear to drown alone." Ashford's hands shook. The knife drew more blood. Naomi gasped, but did not cry out. "I am sorry," Ashford whispered. "I am sorry, Rebecca. I am so sorry I could not save you." "And then save someone else," Naomi said. "Save me. Save the women in the basement. Give them back to their families. Let them go home." For a long moment, nothing moved. The fire crackled above. Smoke swirled. Caleb kept his rifle, trained his finger on the trigger, knowing he could not shoot, knowing he would anyway if Ashford pushed that knife 1 inch deeper. Then slowly, Dr. Vincent Ashford lowered the knife. His arm fell away from Naomi's throat. He stood there, swaying, tears running down his face. "I am tired," he said. "I am so very tired." Naomi turned and did something that shocked everyone. She hugged him, just for a second, just long enough to show him that he was still human, that someone still saw him as a person, not a monster. "Your daughter can rest now," Naomi said gently, "and maybe someday you can too." Ashford nodded. He let the knife fall from his fingers. It clattered on the wooden floor. Then he sat down right there in the smoke and chaos and covered his face with his hands. The last guard tried to make a run for it. Gray caught him at the door, knocked him unconscious with the butt of his rifle. Caleb ran to Naomi, pulled her away from Ashford, checked the cut on her throat. It was shallow, painful, but not dangerous. He pulled a cloth from his pocket and pressed it to the wound. "You are insane," he said. "I am alive," she replied. "Barely, but alive, and so are they." She pointed to the stairs leading down to the basement. Gray was already there, calling out that it was safe, that help had come. Slowly, 5 women emerged from the darkness below, filthy, terrified, beaten, but alive. One of them was Catherine Mitchell, the teacher. The woman who had once taught Caleb's daughter. She looked at him with eyes that did not quite focus, eyes that had seen too much. Then recognition dawned. "Mr. Blackwood," she whispered, "is it really you?" "It is," Caleb said gently. "You are safe now, Miss Mitchell. I am taking you home." She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. The other women gathered around. Naomi moved among them, checking their injuries, speaking softly, telling them it was over. Outside they heard the sound of horses. Many horses. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hayes and 20 soldiers from Fort Mason came thundering up the trail. Gray had sent word after all hours ago when they first captured the map. The old man thought of everything. Hayes dismounted and walked into the burning building. He looked at the scene, at Ashford sitting on the floor, at the dead and wounded guards, at the rescued women, at Caleb Blackwood standing covered in blood and soot with an Apache woman at his side. Blackwood, Hayes said. "5 years, not even a letter." "Sorry, sir," Caleb replied. "I was lost. And now you are found." Hayes looked at Naomi. "Miss, are you all right?" "I am well," Colonel Naomi said. "Thanks to this man." Hayes smiled slightly. He always was good at his job. He turned back to Caleb. "We will take it from here. Get these women to the fort. Get them medical attention. Get their statements. Put Ashford on trial." He paused. "And Blackwood, welcome back. Glad you found a reason to come home." Caleb looked at Naomi. She looked back at him. And in that moment, with the sawmill burning behind them and the dawn breaking over the mountains, they both knew that home was not a place. It was a person. It was each other. The journey back to Fort Mason took 6 hours. The rescued women rode in a military wagon wrapped in blankets tended by the fort surgeon. Dr. Vincent Ashford rode in chains, silent, his eyes empty of everything but exhaustion and grief. The guards, those who survived, were bound and marched on foot, and Caleb walked alongside Naomi, neither speaking, both too exhausted for words. By the time they reached the fort, the sun was high and warm. The snow had begun to melt, dripping from the eaves of the wooden buildings, turning the parade ground to mud. Soldiers stopped their work to watch as the strange procession entered through the main gate. An Apache woman in borrowed clothes, a mountain man who looked like he had fought a war, an old trapper with a blood-stained bandage on his shoulder, 5 traumatized women, 1 broken doctor, and enough violence in the air to make everyone nervous. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes directed operations with calm efficiency. The women were taken to the infirmary. Ashford and his men were locked in the stockade. Statements would be taken, evidence gathered. Justice in its slow and imperfect way would begin. Hayes found Caleb in the stable checking on the horses, avoiding the crowds and questions. The colonel stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching his former scout work. Then he spoke. "You did good work today, Blackwood. Saved 5 lives, maybe more if we can trace Ashford's network." "It was not me," Caleb said without turning. "It was her. The Apache woman. Naomi. Her name is Naomi." Hayes nodded. "I gathered that. Also gathered that she means something to you." Caleb's hand stilled on the horse's bridle. "Yes, sir. She does." "Good," Hayes said simply. "You have been dead too long, Caleb. It is about time you came back to life." He turned to leave, then paused. "There will be a hearing, day after tomorrow. Federal marshal is coming from Seattle. Ashford will face charges. The women will testify. We will need you there too, both of you. We will be there," Caleb promised. Hayes nodded and left. Caleb finished with the horses and went to find Naomi. He found her in the infirmary, sitting beside Catherine Mitchell's bed, holding the older woman's hand. Catherine looked terrible. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. But she was talking, and that was something. Naomi listened with patience and compassion, never interrupting, never judging. When Catherine finally fell asleep, exhausted by her own story, Naomi stood and saw Caleb waiting. She came to him, and he saw that she had been crying. Silent tears that left tracks through the dirt on her face. She told me everything Naomi said quietly, what they did to her, to all of them. Ashford kept them drugged, kept them compliant. He was preparing them for sale, breaking their spirits so they would be easier to control. I am sorry you had to hear that. I needed to hear it, Naomi said. I needed to know what I escaped, what we saved them from. She looked up at him, and in her eyes was something fierce and unbreakable. I will testify. I will tell everything. And I will make sure everyone knows what Vincent Ashford is. Not a monster, not evil incarnate, just a man who let his pain destroy him, who let his grief become a weapon against the innocent. That is more mercy than he deserves. Perhaps Naomi agreed, but mercy is not about what people deserve. It is about who we choose to be. Caleb reached out and touched the bandage on her neck where Ashford's knife had cut her. His hand shook slightly. When I saw him holding that knife to your throat, he said, his voice rough, when I thought I might lose you, I realized something. What? That I cannot go back to that cabin, cannot go back to being alone, cannot go back to being half dead. He looked at her directly. I do not know what comes next for us. I do not know if you can forgive what my people did to yours. I do not know if there is a future for a mountain hermit and an Apache woman. But I know I have to try, have to hope. Naomi was very still. Then she spoke. When I was a child, my grandmother told me a story. She said that every person is born with a string tied to their heart. And somewhere in the world another person is born with the other end of that string. Some people never find their match. They live their whole lives wondering why they feel incomplete. She took his hand and placed it over her heart. He could feel it beating strong and steady. But some people, if they are very lucky or very brave, they follow the string until they find the person on the other end. She paused. I think I found the other end of my string, Caleb Blackwood. I think I found it when you carried me down a mountain, when you promised I would not die alone, when you taught me to fight and let me choose my own battles. I cannot give you an easy life, Caleb said. I am not a wealthy man. I have nothing but a cabin and some land and these hands. I do not want easy. Naomi replied, I want real. I want true. I want a man who sees me as I am and does not try to make me smaller to fit his world. She met his eyes. Can you be that man? I can try, Caleb said. For you, I can try. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. Then that is enough. They might have kissed, then might have sealed the moment with something physical and certain. But the infirmary door opened and Gray limped in his shoulder, freshly bandaged. Sorry to interrupt, the old man said, not looking sorry at all. But there is something you both need to see. He led them outside to the parade ground where a crowd had gathered. In the center of the crowd was a man Caleb recognized, Sheriff Buck Thornton from Silverstone, Ashford's cousin, the corrupt lawman who had turned a blind eye to everything. Thornton was in chains, flanked by 2 federal marshals. His face was red with shame and rage. Hayes stood before him reading charges in a clear, carrying voice. Conspiracy to commit human trafficking, obstruction of justice, accepting bribes. The list went on. We found his ledgers, Gray explained quietly, in Ashford's office at the sawmill. Every payment, every bribe, every time he looked the other way while women disappeared. It is all there, written in his own hand. How did you find them? Caleb asked. Gray grinned. I may have done a little searching while you were busy rescuing people. Old habits. The hearing 2 days later was held in Fort Mason's largest building, the officers' mess hall converted into a makeshift courtroom. Federal Marshal Thomas Garrett presided, a hard-eyed man in his 60s who had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. The 5 rescued women testified. Catherine Mitchell spoke first, her voice shaking but clear. She described how Ashford had sold her medicine for headaches, how she had woken up in the sawmill basement, how she had been told she would be shipped to Canada and sold to a brothel if she did not cooperate. Maylin Harper testified through an interpreter, her English still imperfect, but her meaning devastatingly clear. Her husband had died from Ashford's tonic. When she demanded answers, Ashford had her kidnapped. Mary O'Connor, the Yakima woman, spoke of how Ashford had targeted Native women specifically, how he believed no one would look for them, how he was wrong. Ruth Callahan, the nurse from Seattle, provided medical testimony. She explained how the tonic worked, how the opium created dependence and compliance, how Ashford had weaponized medicine itself. Eliza Dawson, barely 19, could not speak at all. She simply sat in her chair and wept while her written statement was read aloud. The courtroom was silent when it finished. Then it was Naomi's turn. She stood before the assembled crowd, dressed in clean clothes provided by the fort, her long black hair braided in the traditional Apache way. She looked small and young and vulnerable, but when she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the room. "My name is Naomi Redwing. I am of the Chiricahua Apache. I am 24 years old. Vincent Ashford poisoned me, hunted me, and tried to sell me into slavery. If not for Caleb Blackwood and Samuel Grayson, I would be dead, or worse." She paused, letting that sink in. "But I do not stand here today only to accuse. I also stand here to explain." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marshal Garrett frowned. "Miss Redwing, are you defending this man?" "No, sir," Naomi said firmly. "I am explaining him. There is a difference. We cannot prevent monsters if we do not understand how they are made." She looked directly at Ashford, who sat in chains at the defendant's table. His head was bowed. He did not look up. Dr. Ashford was not born evil. He was broken by loss and twisted by pain until he became the very thing that destroyed his daughter. She paused. "I hope he spends the rest of his life in prison. But I also hope that someday he finds a way to forgive himself. Because carrying that much hate, that much guilt, is a prison worse than any cell." The room was absolutely silent. "I am finished," Naomi said and sat down. Caleb testified next, keeping his words simple and factual. He described finding Naomi by the waterfall, the tonic, Ashford's threats, the journey through the mountains, the raid on the sawmill. He did not embellish, did not need to. The truth was damning enough. Gray testified about the ledgers, the evidence, the network of corruption that had allowed Ashford to operate for so long. Finally, Dr. Vincent Ashford was given the chance to speak. He stood slowly, his chains rattling. He looked out at the crowd with eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. "I am guilty," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Of everything. I did it all. I knew what I was doing. I knew it was wrong. I did it anyway." He paused. "My daughter's name was Rebecca. She was 20 years old when she was taken. She wanted to help people. She volunteered at a mission in San Francisco working with immigrants. A man pretending to be a priest befriended her, gained her trust, then took her." His voice cracked. "It took me 3 years to find out what happened, to trace her through the trafficking rings, to finally locate her." He stopped, unable to continue for a moment. "And when I did, she was already dead. Opium overdose. The same drug I used to ease my wife's pain. The same drug I later used to destroy other families." He looked at Naomi. "You were right, Miss Redwing. I became the thing that killed my daughter. I became the monster I hated, and I have no excuse, no justification. I am guilty." He paused. "Do with me what you will." Marshal Garrett pronounced sentence that afternoon. Vincent Ashford would be transported to the federal prison in Seattle to await trial on charges of kidnapping, human trafficking, and attempted murder. If convicted, he would likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Sheriff Buck Thornton received a similar sentence. His trial would come later. The men who worked for Ashford, those who survived, would face lesser charges, but still substantial prison time. Justice, imperfect and incomplete, had been served. That evening, Caleb and Naomi walked together along the fort's perimeter, watching the sun set over the Cascade Peaks. They had not been alone together since the sawmill, had not had time to process everything that had happened, everything that had changed. "What will you do now?" Caleb asked. "I do not know," Naomi admitted. "The Quaker family in Portland expects me. They will want me to return, to continue my nursing training, to live a quiet, safe life. Is that what you want?" Naomi was quiet for a long moment, watching the colors shift in the sky from gold to red to purple. "No," she finally said. "I thought it was. I thought safety and peace were what I needed. But now I know the truth. I need purpose. I need to help people who have been hurt the way I was hurt, the way those women were hurt." She turned to face him. Catherine is going to open a shelter in Silverstone, a place for women escaping violence, women who need protection and help. She asked me to work with her, to be a nurse there, to teach the women how to defend themselves, how to heal. That sounds like important work, Caleb said. It is, but it means I cannot go back to Portland, cannot return to the life I had planned. She paused, and I find that I am not sad about that at all. Caleb felt hope kindle in his chest, dangerous, terrifying hope. The cabin is empty, he said, has been empty for 5 years. It is not much, but it could be a home, if someone wanted it to be. Naomi stepped closer to him, close enough that he could count the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. I want it to be, she said softly. But I will not be a traditional wife, Caleb. I will not stay home and cook and clean while you hunt. I will work. I will help Catherine. I will have my own purpose. I would not want you any other way, Caleb replied. And I will not convert. Naomi continued. I will not pretend to be something I am not. I am Apache. I will always be Apache. I will teach our children, if we have children, to be proud of both their heritages, white and Apache, mountain and plains. Our children, Caleb repeated, tasting the words, imagining it. A second chance at family, at life, at joy. If you want them, Naomi said. If you can bear to risk your heart again. Caleb reached out and took her hand. It fit in his perfectly, as if they had been designed for each other. I am terrified, he admitted. Terrified of losing you. Terrified of failing again. Terrified of being happy, because I know how much it hurts when happiness ends. Then we will be terrified together, Naomi said. And we will be brave together too, because the alternative is to live half a life, to never risk, to never love. And I refuse to do that. I refuse to let fear win. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle on his weathered skin. I choose life, Caleb Blackwood. I choose hope. I choose you. If you will have me, I will have you. Caleb said, his voice rough with emotion. Today, tomorrow, for as long as you will stay. Then kiss me, Naomi said. Kiss me properly this time. Not a brush of lips in a moment of terror. Kiss me like a man who has decided to live again. So he did. He kissed her as the sun set over the mountains, kissed her as the world turned from day to night, kissed her as the stars began to appear one by one, filling the sky with light. And for the first time in 5 years, Caleb Blackwood felt his frozen heart begin to thaw. 6 months later, Silverstone, Washington Territory. The town had changed, or perhaps Caleb had changed, and so the town looked different through his eyes. He came down from the cabin once a month now, sometimes twice, always making the journey to see Naomi to bring supplies to help where he was needed. Catherine's shelter had opened in February, funded by donations, and the small fortune recovered from Ashford's seized assets. It was a modest building, 2 stories with room for 15 women and their children. A safe place, a healing place. Naomi worked there 6 days a week, treating injuries, teaching self-defense, listening to stories of pain and survival. She was brilliant at it, patient, fierce, compassionate. The women trusted her in a way they did not trust anyone else. On Sundays, she closed the clinic and spent the day with Caleb. They would walk through the forest together, and she would teach him Apache medicine while he taught her the ways of the high country. They would sit by streams and talk about everything and nothing. They would hold hands like young lovers, even though neither of them was young anymore. But their peace was short-lived. 2 weeks after the trial, Naomi received a letter. It bore no return address, just a single line in elegant script. Rebecca Ashford lives, and she remembers you. Caleb's blood ran cold when he read it. If Rebecca truly lived, if she knew Naomi had testified against her father, would she seek revenge or reconciliation? The answer came 3 days later. A woman appeared at Catherine's shelter. Mid-30s, refined features, haunted eyes. She introduced herself as Rebecca Ashford Miller. I need to speak with Naomi Redwing, she said quietly, to thank her for stopping my father before he destroyed more lives. to thank her for finally giving me permission to forgive him. Naomi met with Rebekah alone. They spoke for 2 hours. What passed between them remained private, but when Naomi emerged, she was crying. She asked me to visit him, Naomi told Caleb that night, to tell him that his daughter lives, that she forgives him, that he can finally let go of his guilt. "Will you?" Caleb asked. "Yes," Naomi said, "because mercy is not just for those who deserve it, it's for those who need it most." 2 weeks later, Naomi traveled to Seattle. She spent 1 hour with Vincent Ashford in prison. She gave him Rebekah's letter. She watched him read it, watched him weep, watched the weight of 17 years lift from his shoulders. "Thank you," Ashford whispered, "for showing me that even monsters can find redemption." "You were never a monster," Naomi replied. "You were a father drowning in grief. But now you can rest. Your daughter is safe. Your story can finally end." In April they were married. 2 ceremonies, one in each tradition. First, an Apache ceremony on the hillside behind Caleb's cabin with Gray as the only witness. Naomi wore a traditional dress decorated with turquoise and silver. Caleb wore his cleanest buckskins. They spoke vows in a mixture of Apache and English, promising to walk together, to hunt together, to share all things equally. The second ceremony was at the small church in Silverstone, presided over by a visiting minister who asked no questions and judged no one. Catherine attended along with the other rescued women. May Lynn Harper cried. Gray grinned and said it was about damn time. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes came from Fort Mason and gave away the bride since Naomi had no family. He told her she was gaining not just a husband, but a good man, the best he had ever served with. That night in the cabin on the mountain, Naomi and Caleb began their life together as husband and wife, not as owner and owned, not as protector and protected, but as equals, partners, 2 people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. In May, Naomi discovered she was pregnant. She told Caleb one evening as they sat by the fire, his hand resting on her still flat belly. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Afraid something will go wrong. Afraid I will not be a good mother. Afraid that I will leave," Caleb finished. "That I will go hunting and never come back, and you will be alone." "Yes," Naomi whispered. Caleb pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, resting his chin on top of her head. "I will not leave," he promised. "I will be here for every moment, every breath, every day. I swear it on everything I hold sacred." "What if something happens anyway?" Naomi asked. "What if fate takes you from me despite your promise?" "Then fate will have to fight me for it," Caleb said. "And I am meaner than fate." Naomi laughed despite her tears. "You are impossible. I am yours," Caleb corrected. "There is a difference." Their son was born in January of 1885 during a snowstorm that buried the cabin under 6 feet of white. Caleb delivered the baby himself, following Naomi's instructions, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. When the child finally emerged crying and perfect and impossibly small, Caleb wept for the second time in his adult life. The name felt right, a way to honor the past while embracing the future. A second Daniel, but his own person, not a replacement. Redsky for the Apache scout who had once saved Caleb's life and taught him to see the world differently. 2 years later, a daughter came, Elizabeth Mourning Dove Blackwood, named for both mothers, both women who had shaped the people Caleb and Naomi had become. Then in 1890, a second daughter, Grace Littlebird Blackwood, the last child, the filling, the completion of their family. Caleb proved to be a devoted father in a way he had never been the first time. He had learned from loss, had learned that every moment mattered, that children grew faster than you could believe, that love was not something you could save for later. He taught his children to track and hunt and survive in the wilderness. Naomi taught them Apache language and medicine and stories. Between them, the children learned 2 worlds, 2 ways of seeing, 2 sets of traditions that they would carry forward. Gray visited often, becoming the grandfather the children never had. He died in 1920 peacefully in his sleep at the age of 99. They buried him on the hill behind the cabin next to the 3 pine trees that marked Caleb's first family. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes retired in 1895 and moved to Seattle. He died in 1912, and Caleb made the long journey to attend the funeral standing in the rain with tears mixing with rainwater on his weathered face. May Lynn Harper ran the shelter until 1940, when age and illness finally forced her to retire. In those 55 years, she helped more than 3,000 women escape violence and find new lives. The shelter still bears her name. Dr. Vincent Ashford was tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. He served his time quietly, working in the prison infirmary healing where once he had hurt. In 1895, he received a letter. It was from a woman who claimed to be his daughter, Rebecca. The letter explained that there had been a mistake. The dead woman Ashford had found was not his daughter, but another victim who had been using Rebecca's name. The real Rebecca had escaped in 1881, had been too afraid to contact her father, had eventually made a new life in Montana under a different identity. She was alive, married, happy, and she forgave him. Ashford wept when he read the letter. He wrote back immediately, begging for a chance to see her, to explain, to apologize. Rebecca visited him once in 1896. They spoke for 3 hours. What they said to each other no one knows. But when Rebecca left, Ashford was smiling for the first time in 17 years. He died in 1902, still in prison, but at peace. His last words were reported to be, "I am coming, Rebecca. I am finally coming home." Naomi worked at the shelter until 1938, when her health began to fail. She was 79 years old, still sharp-minded, but physically frail. Caleb cared for her in the cabin, cooking her meals, reading to her, holding her hand through the long winter nights. She died on a spring morning peacefully with Caleb beside her, and all 3 of their children gathered around. Her last words were in Apache. "Nihi nanilkad tahocho." We have walked together safely. Caleb buried her on the hill with the others. 6 graves now, 6 pine trees. Elizabeth, Daniel, Grace, Gray, Hayes, Naomi. Everyone he had loved, everyone who had shaped him, everyone who had made him into the man he became. He visited the graves every morning, as he always had, talking to them about the weather, the animals, the grandchildren who came to visit, telling them stories, keeping them alive in memory. December 1943. The cabin. The fire had burned low while Caleb told his story. William sat frozen in his chair, tears streaming down his face, staring at his great-grandfather with new understanding. "You loved her," William said. "Grandmother Naomi, you really loved her." "More than I thought possible," Caleb confirmed, "more than I had words to express." "She saved me, William. Not just that day by the waterfall, every day after. She saved me from myself. And you saved her." "We saved each other," Caleb corrected. "That is how it works when it is real. It is not one person rescuing another. It is 2 people choosing every day to keep walking together, to face the darkness side by side, to be each other's strength when their own fails." William looked at the 3 objects Caleb had laid out at the beginning of the story: the turquoise stone, the medicine bottle, the wedding photograph. "Why did you wait so long to tell this story?" he asked. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "Because some stories are too sacred to share," he finally said. "Too personal, too precious." "I kept this story close to my heart for 60 years, William. Took it out only in private moments, only when I visited the graves and spoke to Naomi as if she were still here." "Then why tell me now?" "Because you are going to war," Caleb said, looking at his great-grandson with eyes that had seen too much. "You are going to see terrible things, do terrible things. You will watch friends die. You may die yourself. And in those dark moments, you will need something to hold on to. Some reason to keep fighting. Some reminder that the world holds beauty as well as horror." He reached out and picked up the turquoise stone, holding it in his weathered palm. "I want you to carry this with you," Caleb said. "Naomi wore it the day I found her. She gave it to me on our wedding day. said it would keep me safe, keep me grounded, remind me of what I was fighting for. He held it out to William. Now I give it to you. Carry it with you to Europe. Let it remind you that there are people worth protecting, that there is a future worth building, that even in the worst darkness there is still love and hope and the possibility of redemption. William took the stone with trembling hands. It was warm from Caleb's palm, smooth from decades of handling. It seemed to pulse with its own inner light. I will carry it, William promised. I will keep it safe. And when I come home, I will return it to you. No, Caleb said gently. When you come home, you will give it to your son or daughter. You will tell them the story, and they will tell their children, and so on down through the generations. That is how we survive, William, not as individuals, but as links in a chain, each of us holding the stories of those who came before, each of us passing them forward to those who come after. He paused. That is what legacy means. Not monuments, not wealth, but the stories we leave behind, the lessons we teach, the love we give. Those are the things that endure. William stood and crossed to his great-grandfather. He knelt beside the old man's chair and hugged him, something he had not done since he was a child. Caleb's arms came around him, still strong despite his age, still capable of comfort. Thank you, William whispered, for telling me, for trusting me with this. Thank you for listening, Caleb replied. Now go. Your family is waiting. And William, when you have children, tell them about Naomi. Tell them about the Apache woman who taught a broken mountain man how to live again. Tell them that love is possible even after everything else is lost. Tell them that we are always, always capable of choosing hope over despair. I will. William promised. I swear it. He stood, put on his coat, and walked to the door. He paused there, looking back at the old man by the fire. Will I see you again, Grandpa Caleb? Caleb smiled. A small, sad smile. Perhaps. Perhaps not. I am 105 years old, boy. I have lived longer than I ever expected or deserved. But whether you see me again or not, know this. I am proud of you. Your grandmother would be proud of you. All of them would be proud. You come from a line of survivors, of fighters, of people who refuse to let darkness win. I will make you proud, William said. You already have, Caleb replied. William left. The door closed, and Caleb Blackwood sat alone in his cabin as he had sat alone for the past 5 years since Naomi died. But he did not feel alone. Not really. The cabin was full of ghosts, beautiful ghosts. Ghosts he welcomed. He stood slowly, his joints protesting, and walked to the window. Outside, the 6 pine trees stood tall and strong against the winter sky. The sun was setting, turning the snow to gold and rose and purple. Caleb put his hand against the cold glass and spoke aloud. Soon he said to the trees, to the graves, to the people he had loved, soon I will join you, and we will walk together again, not in this world but in the next, wherever that may be. He turned back to the fire and settled into his chair. He was tired, so very tired, but it was a good tired, the tired of a life fully lived, of promises kept, of love given and received. He closed his eyes and let the warmth of the fire wash over him, and in his mind he saw her, Naomi, young again as she had been that first day by the waterfall, fierce and beautiful and alive. She smiled at him and held out her hand. Nihi nanilkad, she said. We walk together. Adodulju, Caleb replied. You will be well. And as the fire burned low and the cabin grew dark and the snow fell softly outside, Caleb Blackwood smiled, because he knew with a certainty that transcended faith or logic or reason that he would see her again, would hold her again, would walk with her again through mountains that never ended and days that never grew cold. He knew it because love, real love, does not end with death. It transforms, it continues, it endures. And that knowledge, that certainty, was enough. March 15th, 1944. Caleb Blackwood died peacefully in his sleep 3 months after telling his story to William. He was 105 years old. They buried him on the hill behind the cabin in the 7th grave beneath the 7th pine tree. His children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren gathered for the funeral. More than 60 people, all descended from the mountain man and the Apache woman who had found each other in the wilderness. William survived the war. He fought in France and Germany, carrying the turquoise stone in his breast pocket through every battle. He was wounded twice, but never seriously. He came home in 1946, married his sweetheart, and had 4 children. He told all of them the story of Caleb and Naomi. The cabin still stands. It has been maintained by the family for generations, preserved as a monument to the people who lived there. The hill with the 7 graves is now a protected site surrounded by a low fence marked with a plaque that tells the story in brief. Catherine's Shelter still operates in Silverstone, now a large complex serving women throughout the Pacific Northwest. A statue of Catherine and Naomi stands in the courtyard. 2 women of different cultures working together for justice. The turquoise stone passed from William to his daughter Rebecca, then to her son James, then to his daughter Susan. It is still carried by the family, still passed down, still treasured, still a reminder that love endures. And sometimes on quiet mornings when the mist rises from the valleys and the sun turns the peaks to gold hikers. In the Cascade Mountains, report seeing 2 figures walking together through the trees. A tall man with a wild beard and a rifle on his back. A small woman with long black hair and a turquoise stone at her throat. They walk side by side, these ghosts, neither ahead nor behind. They move through the forest like smoke, like memory, like love itself. And if you listen carefully, if the wind is right, you can hear them speaking. We walk together. We are well. And then they fade, returning to whatever place holds the souls of those who love too much to ever truly die. Returning to mountains that have no end, to a story that will never stop being told, because that is what it means to leave a legacy. Not to be remembered perfectly, but to be remembered truly. To have your story passed down through the generations. To have your love, your choices, your moments of courage become part of the great river of human experience that flows from past to future without ever stopping. Caleb and Naomi Blackwood, the mountain man and the Apache healer, the broken man and the poisoned woman, the 2 lost souls who found each other in the darkness and chose against all odds to walk toward the light. Their story is over, but it is also just beginning, again and again. Every time it is told, every time someone hears it and decides that maybe, just maybe, they too can choose hope over despair, love over fear, life over death. That is the power of story. That is the power of love. That is the power of 2 people who refuse to let the world break them. And that power never dies, never fades, never ends. It simply waits for the next person to pick it up, carry it forward, and add their own chapter to the endless book of human courage. The story continues, always, forever, as it was, as it is, as it always will be.